It's Mom and Pop Video Shop.
Recording. All right. Welcome to the Mom and Pop Video Shop. We have a special treat for you today. We are joined by filmmaker Brad Sykes. So, Brad, you're a writer, a director, producer. Pretty much, you wear all the hats. I think that's fair to say, in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and ultimately, I found out about you because my friend Rick Patterson tagged me on a post you had done about Dreams of the Dead coming out on VHS, which is a film you made back in the 90s, right?
Yep.
Shot on video.
Yep.
I am a massive fan of shot on video, and I was like, okay, yes, please. I want that. And then I reached out to you and you were very nice. And you were like, hey, and I got a couple other things on VHS if you're interested. I'm like, yes, as you can see, yes, please. So I'm happy to say one of those, The Pact, is currently playing on the old 25-inch RCA console TV as we speak. And High Fear was the other one I got, and which is also available, which I'm sure we'll go into, is available in other streaming, easier ways to get it than VHS.
Right. Yeah, my stuff is available in other formats.
Yes. Yeah. I'm such a hipster wannabe. I'm like, I'm going to make a movie and only release it on VHS.
I cheated and watched a little bit of High Fear last night on Tubi. I got I'm not as cool as Joel.
You slacker.
Hey man, we aim to really with say a movie like High Fear and really any of our films, but High Fear was a good example. It was a new movie. It was it came out last year, but we wanted to do we have the streaming release, we have the DVD and all that. But I did the VHS. We kind of do that on the side. We do these limited edition VHS of those films because of the fans who want that stuff, and also because if you know my work, I've been making movies since VHS was a thing. Mm-hmm. So there's some people who collect my films. They've got some of my older stuff on VHS. They like to have the newer ones on tape too. So that's why we did that. But it's great. I mean, if you're watching the movie wherever you're watching it, that's great. I appreciate you watching it.
Yeah, and I do have some questions if you're cool with fielding them about your shot on video time.
Sure.
So, for instance, with The Pact, since this is literally playing right now, what did you shoot on? Was it SVHS, VHS? Do you even remember?
I definitely remember. It was shot on High 8.
Oh, okay.
In fact, just to give you a bit of my background, like around the time I made The Pact, in the early 90s, I was making shorts first. This is in Virginia Beach, Virginia, where I went to school, went to high school. And anyway, me and my friends, we had a film club in high school. And that film club was really just an excuse to get everybody together on the weekends and shoot these things. Yeah. And so we started doing shorts, and then we started making features. My senior year of high school, we made one feature, then we made another one that kind of dragged into the summer. And anyway, these were all shot in High 8. That was the camera I had. In fact, back then I don't want to say it was state of the art, but it was a few notches above, say, VHS. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't as, I don't know if you guys remember VHS-C, but there was that other form, weird thing with tape inside of a tape.
Yep.
Yeah.
High 8 tapes were a little bit bigger than mini DV tape, but obviously way smaller than VHS, and the cameras were smaller. And that was significant because it allowed me to move the camera pretty much wherever I wanted. I could put the camera wherever I wanted and move it quickly if I needed to catch something. Yeah, which you couldn't do so much with VHS. It was kind of cumbersome with all these cables and stuff. So yeah, the Pact was the last feature I made in Virginia out of all those movies we did, and we made it in the summer of 1995.
Do you happen to remember anything as far as how long it took to produce it, or? Oh
yeah, we shot it. Well, basically, I was going to film. By that point, I was in college. I was going to film school at Boston University, but I was going to school there. But whenever I'd come home for breaks, I would make movies with my friends, my old film club friends. And The Pact was definitely those people. It was definitely that core group. We had by that point maybe 4 or 5 people that were still interested in doing this stuff. But that was enough. And we shot it over the summer. I mean, I literally, talking about the mom and pop video shop, I actually worked in a mom and pop video store during that summer in Virginia. And basically, when I wasn't working part-time at the video store, I was putting this movie together, and we were shooting it down at down at the ocean front, and it was a lot of beach scenes, as you can see. And that's how we made the movie. It was all during that summer. I literally shot and edited the movie there because I had a relative who actually had an editing setup in her house, which was really lucky for me. So I was able to edit the movie there and in a really nice, under really nice conditions. And so, so summer 95 from beginning to end, started the summer talking about it, ended the summer with a finished movie.
Yeah. And was it deck to deck editing where you had to build the tape? Do you remember?
It was definitely what you call, linear editing. Yeah. There was an edit controller and there were 2 decks. Yeah.
Okay.
And actually that one, you mentioned SVHS. That movie, not all of them, but that movie, I actually had an SVHS master because she had, my aunt had the capability for that. She had SVHS editing. So I figured, well, why not bump up the quality of the master at least? Because some of the other features were literally shot in high 8 and then they were just bumped down to VHS for the final master. That's how they were done. Yeah. So this one, the Pact, in 1995, I took advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll say for what it's worth on this really ancient TV, it actually looks really good. So,
well, we tried to shoot outdoors a lot. That always helps the video. And I really didn't have any lights to speak of. I mean, I just had some front mounted kind of almost like news gathering type camera lights that you put on the front. Yeah. And use those for night scenes. But then whenever we were at the house, we just used the available lighting, practicals, I guess you'd call them, otherwise known as people's lamps.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, but I'm glad I think it came out, it looks pretty decent for what it is. I mean, for something that was made, micro budget horror made during that time on that format. Yeah. I'm happy with a lot of how it looks.
You were Dogma 95 in 1995. That's
yes,
the way I look at it.
Yes, we were.
Cool.
I was really into those movies when they first started making them, like The Celebration. That movie was very inspiring to me. I didn't end up making a movie like that, but that was.
But that idea,
making those films. But you're right. They took that basically that DIY thing that SOV filmmakers had been doing for a while. Yeah. All of a sudden, it was cool and artsy and art house. Theatrical releases. Basically the same thing, just taking the video and printing it to film and put it in the theater.
Yeah. There was, speaking of the beach, there was the one scene where the guy, it's relatively early on, it's walking along in the fence. It totally reminded me of Jaws. I'm assuming that was on purpose, but
what's funny? It's weird you bring that up. That I do have a memory for these things. That was the very first shot we ever shot in that movie.
Really?
I don't know why I remember that, but I do. I remember the trailing along the broken fence with his feet walking. Yep. I wasn't thinking of Jaws at all. I don't know what I was thinking. If anything, that movie is more influenced by Euro horror films. But sometimes you're just inspired by your setting. Oh yeah. In the case of that movie, I was very inspired by the beach and that house that I found where we shot the movie. I kind of found that just by walking on the beach one day. Yeah. So, yeah.
And my buddy Rick, the one who turned me on to you, he's from Virginia Beach as well. So.
Yeah. Rick and I, we've talked a bit back and forth.
Yeah, he told me. Yeah, he's like, oh yeah, he's a great guy. You'll
He's very cool too. It's just cool to talk to anyone from the area because like when I was making these things, I never met anybody else who was doing anything like that. Toward the end of the time I was there, I started to kind of brush up against some professionals who were working on shows. There were Discovery Channel shows that were being shot in the area, but nobody was, who was actually going out and making like their own little horror movie or their own little anything. So I was kind of I felt like I was pretty much the only person doing that back then.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you went on to do many more things. And I highly encourage, before we started recording, we were talking about your Film Courage interview that you did. But in that, you went in depth to a lot of the movies when you first starting out. And it was really cool. And there's something specific within some of those early things you worked on that I want to talk to you about. But I'm going to save that towards the end because I wanted to segue from your sort of beginnings to the more recent things, because I definitely want us to touch on High Fear, which obviously I have a VHS. I know it's available on Amazon at the very least. Was it Tubi?
Oh yeah. What, High Fear? High Fear? Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's everywhere. I mean, it's as far as the DVD is concerned, it's you can find it. Yeah, Amazon's definitely, you can find it there, and just about any retailer, DVD retailer that's out there has got it. And then there's a ton of services that have it. So, Tubi is one of them you mentioned earlier, and obviously Prime Video and iTunes, everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere. So
yeah. Well, what's really super cool about it, I didn't realize this until you sent it to me, that it has like SOV sort of legends besides yourself involved as well, which like Tim Ritter did a segment. Yep. Todd Sheets did a segment.
Yep. Yeah, those guys you just mentioned. I mean, High Fear is the third film in a trilogy. Mm-hmm. And the first film is called High 8. I was just talking about High 8 video. Well, that was something that we did in 2013. Basically, actually talking about Tim Ritter. Tim and I were talking about, wouldn't it be cool if we did those of us who made SOV movies for a while, what if we did our own like VHS type film? And Tim actually said, "What if we should call it High 8, Horror Independent 8," which I thought sounded great. Mm-hmm. And I know a great title when I hear it. And so then I asked Josephine, my producing partner, my wife and producing partner, I said, "What do you think about handling this, like executive producing this anthology? And if we'll get 8 filmmakers and they'll each do a short, and that'll be High 8." And she was interested in doing it. So then we moved forward with it, and we got Tim. We got Todd Sheets, we got Chris Seaver, we got Donald Farmer, we got Marcus Koch. I mean, it was pretty much everyone I asked to be part of this was interested in being part of it. Mm-hmm. And some of these guys, I knew them a bit on social media beforehand, but I never worked with any of them before, Mm-hmm. But that's how the first film started, was, just to do something fun, go back to our roots. Like when I was doing The Pact or things like that, where you're just having fun with your friends. You're not worried that much about the commercial aspect of it. Mm-hmm. When the ironic thing, though, is the movie was extremely well received everywhere. And that's why we ended up making High Death, and then we did High Fear. And mentioning Tim and Todd did segments for all 3 films, I mean, as well as myself. So we have a nice continuation there where, you literally get to see some of the same filmmakers contribute to all 3 movies, which I think is very unique in the anthology world. I don't think there's any other anthology series that has directors that keep returning like that for, let's say, 3 films.
Well, and I was going to say that I feel like independent, film is the only place you could get that. I can't think of a mainstream anthology with directors that, especially,
no, they might come down for one, but by the time they've done another one, there's probably, might be different people on board, different producers on board, the money aspect might have gone down, that tends to happen a lot. Or there's other people that just really want to be part of it, and the producers will we'll go with them, But I really enjoy working with Tim and Todd in particular, and Tim Ritter. I mean, and Todd, I've actually met with a bunch of times since he's come to LA a few times. So it's pretty cool because these things are kind of done remotely. Everyone shoots their segment where they're from and they're in their state, and then we put them together here in LA. So it's been really cool for me to work with these guys, talk to them, and just kind of exchange creative ideas and stuff. And that's what we did on all 3 films. That's why we kept doing them, frankly, because we enjoyed it.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, not only do you have High Fear that you worked on, and obviously all the other things that you've got going. And I know you had told me in one of our exchanges that you had produced the Mom and Pop Video Boom documentary that came out, which I still have yet to see, which is hilarious because when we started this channel, like I basically came up with the idea because I was like, well, someone on YouTube has to have used Mom and Pop Video Shop as a name for a channel. And I was like, nobody? Really?
Nobody had taken it, huh?
Nobody had taken it.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
I was like, and I like that it kind of rhymed. So
I was surprised that no one had done a Mom and Pop documentary either. And my friend Bobby Canopy, who's a filmmaker, he basically got in touch with me about this. Really, I mean, what I really did on that is I did an interview for it. He came out here to LA and interviewed me. And I helped him out with a couple of other things, just kind of pointing him in the right direction here and there. But that's really his movie. I mean, that's his passion, and he loves these. He worked in a Hollywood video, and he, obviously rented a lot from mom and pop stores in his hometown, and that's it's his thing. And I like how it came out. Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun little fun documentary. There's a lot of VHS documentaries out there, but that's the only one that focuses on the mom and pop stores and kind of approaches it from this is why Bobby wanted to talk to me and other people from different perspectives, the filmmaker perspective, the distributor's perspective, and maybe the video store owner's perspective too, so it covers a lot of things.
And I thought what was interesting is I didn't know this about you again until I started digging in, and you had mentioned that you had a book. So you're also an author, and yes. Now you've written more than one book though, correct?
Yes, the book that came out last year, was published last year, is my second book, and it's called Neon Nightmares. And it's all about LA thrillers of the 1980s. So you're talking about movies like To Live and Die in LA, The Savage Streets, the Angel movies, 52 Pickup, and then a ton of other, Night of the Comet, Repo Man. There's all these, there are hundreds of these movies actually made and released that all set in LA, and they're all thrillers. And it's really interesting to kind of find all the connections in between these films. Even some of the comedies, you have these like darker comedies, noir kind of comedies, horror. There's a lot of horror and sci-fi, and a lot of these horror and sci-fi movies kind of blend over into the cop film, like The Hidden is a good example. Movies like that. So yeah, I wrote that during the pandemic. Actually, I just started writing in early 2020. I'd been planning it for a while, but that seemed like the right time to actually sit down and write it. Yeah. So I wrote that one, and then and that came out last year through Bear Manor. But my first book is called Terror in the Desert, Dark Cinema of the American Southwest. And that book is all about what I call desert terror movies, like Duel, The Hitcher.
One of our favorite subgenres, man. I love those movies. So
pick up the book, man.
Road horror. I feel like that naturally.
It's broken down by like road thrillers, creature films like Tremors, stuff like that. Cool. Killer car movies like The Car and Wheels of Terror and that. There's and then it branches into the newer stuff too. Actually, a lot of SOV stuff that was shot in the desert. Not only including my stuff. There are tons and tons. Actually, in the 2000s, there was an explosion of micro budget desert movies, which some of which you may or may not have heard of. It kind of goes all the way up to maybe like Nocturnal Animals. That's kind of where I left it off because it was published in 2018. But that was my first book, and that is once again like Neon Nightmares. I wrote these books because I love these movies, and no one else had done a book about them, like to put them all together like that under one roof. And that's why I wrote the books. It's purely the only reason why I wrote them, because they take a while to do. But I love doing it, and I discover movies along the way. I discovered new movies of the Desert Book. Oh, there's like a Native American chapter too that deals with all the, that kind of stuff, supernatural kind of stuff. Yeah. It's then there's all those 50s sci-fi movies are in there too, obviously, like Them and It Came from Outer Space.
Oh, very cool.
I kind of focus in that book. I started really like in the 60s. There's a movie called The Sadist, which is a great low budget, one of the great low budget horror movies ever made. Yes. And that's to me the very first desert terror movie.
Is Arch Hall Jr.?
Yes, Arch Hall Jr.
Yes, got it. I'm trying to pull it from my memory bank.
I have an entire chapter just about The Sadist.
Nice. That's
because
cool.
It's basically you can find almost every aspect of desert terror in that movie. And all those little elements kind of branch off later on and kind of create their own little subgenres. But in The Sadist, it's all there.
Was Steckler involved?
I'd rather talk about The Sadist than my own films.
I haven't seen it in years.
I'm a big fan of that movie.
Was Steckler involved with that one, or am I
actually? I don't think he was.
Okay.
And I
know he did stuff with Arch Hall.
There's a Ray Dennis Steckler movie in the book called Blood Shack.
Okay, I know Blood Shack. Yeah.
Yeah, Blood Shack is another film I feel is very underrated. It's very atmospheric. Great. He made that movie out of nothing. Pulling together a few elements. But it's rich in atmosphere. It's not much in terms of the storyline or whatever. It's a little bit of a mess, but it's just you can't buy that kind of atmosphere. So I'm a big fan of Blood Shack. But no, Steckler was not involved. He did Wild Guitar with Arch Hall.
Wild Guitar. I remember that one.
Movie. Yeah, really fun movie. But no, he didn't. He wasn't involved with that. But there once again, see, like with these films, there are connections to be found, and that's.
Did you ever see? I'm sorry, I'm talking. I think I'm going to delay. I apologize.
No, go ahead.
Did you ever see the Thrill Killers? Steckler's Thrill Killers?
Oh yeah, no, I've seen the Thrill Killers.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's
yeah. No, see, that's another one. It's not as good as The Sadist. I mean, The Sadist is just a gem, like so beautifully. It's beautiful. I mean, almost Sigmund shot The Sadist. I mean, you know. And I think he has a lot to do with the quality in terms of at least the way the film is put, you know, visually presented. But Arch Hall is incredible in the movie too.
Yeah.
The Thrill Killers is fun though. I like Gary Kent. You know, I always enjoy Gary Kent and anything. Yeah. So you know, he's always fun to see in the movie.
Yeah, my friend Terry years ago, like we were working in a movie theater, and when I met him, and I didn't even know who Steckler was. He's like, "Oh, you got to see some of the stuff." And he introduced me to like Wild Guitar, The Sadist, Incredibly Strange Creatures, Thrill Killers. Yep. All of it. So yeah, I have Terry to thank for that.
I had a period where I went through all of his work too.
yeah.
If you haven't seen Blood Shack, I would highly recommend that one though. And also, it's not a long movie. It's probably like 70 minutes or something like that. It won't take that much of your time.
Yeah, what's so cool about Steckler to me too is that, and I know it's not for everybody. It's sort of like SOV in general, it's not for everybody. Right. But he really, I mean, and I know ultimately he seemed to do this where he'd kind of make the movies up as he went along. You know, there's something about that sort of spontaneity. And yes, Ratfinka Boo Boo is nonsensical, but there's something wildly entertaining about that movie.
Well, that's how Blood Shack is, and that's how, well, frankly, a lot of my films are, and that's how The Pact was, really. I mean, like that's how a lot of people's films are made. You know, say micro budget horrors. Like Blood Shack is like we're out in the desert, we're out in Nevada. We got a line on a property, let's call it it's more than a shack, but it's like a little house out there in the kind of middle of nowhere. Yeah. What can we do there? Let's make a horror movie around that. Okay, and we'll call it Blood Shack. Well, that's how The Pact was. I mean, I was literally, editing another project, a previous project. I was going to my aunt's house and Ocean View, driving down there, and she was really near the beach. She was right on the beach. So every day I was drive there, work, and drive back. So I was seeing these beach areas. And one day I just got out of the car and just took a walk on the beach just to clear my head or whatever. And like I'm walking and, you know, off to the left, I see this like empty house, like an abandoned, it was being built is what it was. It was an unfinished building, but it was finished enough that, you know, it was it had a roof and it had walls. And for some reason I was like, that's my movie. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make a movie around that house. And then I literally went home that day and I called up my friend and I said, what do you think about doing like a horror movie at the beach? And, we'll set it around this house. Now I didn't have rights to shoot there. I didn't talk to anybody about it. In fact, what happened was we started shooting, we shot for a while. And then toward the end of the shoot, the owner showed up because there was actually a house in front of that place. It was like people were living there. And they came out and said, what are you guys doing back here? And I'm like, well, we're making a movie, and do you mind, do you mind if we were almost done? And the guy finally said, yeah, I'll let you keep filming here on one condition. Don't set any fires. Okay, well, what he didn't know is that the whole ending of the film is the house burning down. I left that out. We hadn't filmed that part yet. I left that. I said, oh, no, sir, we're not going to start any fires. We would never think of starting fires in here. And then he left. And then, one of the next times we came back, we shot those scenes where there's a candle, all this candles and stuff, and the house burns up. Actually, there's one shot where it's really burning. You see this like altar piece that's kind of on flames. Well, I filmed that. I literally built a little set for that in my backyard, and a friend and I went out there and filmed that later, just so I could do a kind of more of a hero shot of the place really burning up without doing it there. Yeah, so that's how we did it. But there is a through line between guys like Steckler and and filmmakers like me and other people come out are making their first movie now or whatever, where you you see something, you see a property that looks cool and you go, let's make a movie there, Yeah, and I like that. They'll show up and kick you out. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
I was gonna say no, I think that's important. Joel and I have talked quite frequently about doing our own things and different stuff, and you talk about how important the story is, but I think the argument, especially when it comes to low budget, that location and resources that you have access to are probably more important than the story.
That's more important.
You could write a great movie set on a houseboat, but if you don't have a houseboat, your great story's not going to get any legs.
Then you're just writing a spec script that, you know, who knows what will happen with it. I mean, like another one of my heroes is John Russo, who,
I love John Russo.
His book, Making Movies.
Yes, and his horror book too. The How to Make
books. How to Make a Film for 10,000 and Scare Tactics.
Oh, they're great. I love them. Yeah,
they're like the Bible for people like us. And I learned as much or as more from that than I did from going to film school. And that's one of the things that Russo says over and over again is write around what you have access to.
Yep.
And he did it. I mean, he's John Russo and he did it. So why can't you do it?
Yeah.
And so that's how, of course you stretch beyond that. You try to do something beyond just the basic, you know, whatever slasher, or at least I do, but you have to start with resources that you have. That's absolutely, you know, I've done that out here in LA too, on other films, you know, but that's definitely one of the big lessons that I think, and it hasn't changed over the years. It didn't change since like the 60s when they made Blood Shack or whatever.
Yeah.
It's still the same. So,
and I think for anybody that's watching, that's a budding filmmaker too, that when we talk about resources, it's more than just location. It's personnel. If you know somebody that's a great special effects person, and you know, you're got a connection and they've got some time on their hands, and you know, holy cow, why wouldn't you take advantage of
why wouldn't you take advantage? I mean,
like, you know,
like to me it's like, you know, one of the differences would be, say, when I was doing like The Pact, for example, my friend Brett, who's in the movie, he also did the makeup effects. Well, when I met him, I worked with him the longest of anybody on all those projects, and he was originally just doing the makeup effects because he was good at it, and then I started drafting him into acting. But I always knew when I wrote stuff that Brett was going to do the effects. Later on, say on a more professional level out here, I worked as a PA and effects assistant on movies, and I would meet pro effects guys on those movies. Like I was working on, you know, Full Moon movies or Brian Usna films and things like that. And I would meet these guys, and you know what? A lot of them, they were working on those shows, but they weren't in charge. And there may be 3 or 4 or 5 of them. Well, if you're doing a low budget movie of your own and you can make them the key makeup guy, they're going to jump at that. And they're going to do a good job. And your movie is going to benefit from you know, their skills. So that's how I did it out here. There are always people that I had worked with a bit before, and then, you know, other things. And then later on you call up and say, hey, would you come down and can you do, you know, effects on my 6-day movie or whatever? You know, so that's kind of, but yeah, there's always kind of you got to put in the time, however it is, you got to kind of put in the time with people, and it definitely helps to have people around that you can just call up, and you're not just trying to build the thing from the ground up. And that's hard to do. Yeah.
What were the Usna movies?
I worked on, the first one I worked on was called Progeny.
Okay.
It was a sci-fi alien movie, like an alien baby movie.
Okay.
We had a ton of different effects. I was the assistant effects coordinator on that. And Anthony Ferrante was the.
I love, yes. I'm a Fango kid. So
exactly. Yeah, he wrote for Fango. I knew him from that. I mean, I should probably mention that the person who really got me into all the horror business was Jeff Burr.
Which you beat me to it. That's who I was, because I mean, Rick and I we had Rick on back around Christmas time. We covered the OG Black Christmas, and it was right after Jeff had unfortunately passed, and we did like a tribute to him because we are massive Jeff Burr fans. So I wanted to actually talk to you about Jeff Burr. So I'm
glad you guys did that. That's very nice. Jeff was more than just a filmmaker that I worked with. I mean, he was a friend who changed my life. I met my wife through him. I made connections with producers that produced my first movies through Jeff. He was a friend, and I worked with him. I worked with him on 2 movies. This was in '97. I worked on a movie called Spoiler that Jeff did. That was a sci-fi action movie. With Jeffrey Combs and a bunch of other people, a ton of people. And then we went to Romania and we did a movie called Phantom Town. And I was the second unit. Jeff gave me second unit, allowed me to direct second unit on those. I was supposed to be his assistant, but I was given basically a DP and a Panavision camera, and I was directing second unit, which was incredible. Not many people would offer something like that to a recent film school grad, but he did. I even wrote scenes. I got to write additional scenes that were in these movies.
Wow.
Those were incredible experiences. And so it was very upsetting to hear about Jeff last October. In fact, I still kind of can't believe it, to be honest with you, because he touched so many lives, and he really did. And obviously you guys, you have your stories with Jeff too. He was just a real encouraging guy who, was always in your corner, and always willing to help in any way he could. And I still kept in touch with him after he moved back to Georgia. But I was a fan of his too, obviously, before I met him. And then, and then I met him through a friend, basically a mutual friend. And then everything changed after that. My whole life was went into overdrive after that, basically.
You had said in the Film Courage interview, you made a comment about how a lot of your favorite directors are the more offbeat, less mainstream ones that everyone always goes to. Right. And I could very much appreciate that because, and when I saw you work with Jeff Burr, I'm like, honestly, just because of, I saw to me, it's The Offspring. I know it's called Whisper to a Scream based on, but it was The Offspring when I was a kid. And it friggin' mortified me, man.
It's very good. I was living in Georgia when I moved around a bit as a kid. I was living in Georgia when The Offspring was being made. I wasn't living in Dalton, but I was outside Atlanta. So anyway, I read about it in Fangoria. I saw the picture of Jeff with Vincent Price, all that. Wow, cool. Somebody's making a horror movie in Georgia. Yeah. And they got Vincent Price in their movie,
Yeah.
So then I saw, I rented it, and then I followed his career and saw everything he did. And then I was literally my first visit to LA in 96. I was staying with a friend from Georgia. This is kind of important. Georgia kind of figures in here. And she was like my former next door neighbor, one of their kids. And I was just crashing on her couch and driving around and, driving down Hollywood Boulevard and looking at, I was looking at horror stuff, there's that. And she's like, oh, you like these horror movies, don't you, Brad? I'm like, yeah. She's like, you probably know who this, you ever heard of a guy named Jeff Burr? Leatherface.
Yes. Stepfather 2, man. Stepfather 2 is great.
Room for Daddy or whatever.
Yes.
And so then she's like, oh, I'm working on a movie with Jeff right now. And actually the movie she was working on was something that's never been released ever.
Really?
It's called American Hero. It was it's on his IMDb page, but it's never been released. It was a weird project. I'm not going to get into the story behind it, but it was weird. It had some strange stuff going on, but it was a completed movie. And Jeff was doing that at the time. And my friend Kristen was working on that. So she set up basically a meeting for us. We went and got together at, where was it? It was some bar in Hollywood. And Jeff couldn't have been nicer. Then the next day he took me over to Full Moon. He introduced me to Charlie Band. Everybody was working there at the time. And then roughly a little more than a year later, I graduated and I came out to LA, and the first job that I got was from Jeff. And he called me up and said, hey, if you can make it out here in May, you can work on Spoiler. And of course, so I actually skipped graduation ceremony to get to LA so I could work on this, 3-week sci-fi movie shot in Burbank. And like I said, a lot of people were in that. Meg Foster was in that. Jeff was bringing people he worked with before, and then there were other people, and he loved actors. Clu Gulager came down. I actually knew Clu for a while. He didn't end up acting in that movie, but you just meet a lot of cool people through Jeff. That's all. Yeah. So yeah. And then the one in Romania that's a whole nother, that's probably a separate interview for that. Okay. But that was a really cool experience for me too, to be overseas in that kind of carnival atmosphere in the summer of 97. Yeah. Really cool.
Yeah. Does it kind of sometimes blow your mind to think that, because I remember that time period well enough to know, I'm in my 20s and I'm, you don't appreciate, let's just say a lot of times, I know I didn't always appreciate things that were going on, but it's like in hindsight, you're like, man.
I think I did appreciate to some degree, because I remember when I boarded the plane to come back to Boston. I'd been up for a bunch of hours, and I remember I fell asleep and I woke up and I was like, did I just dream that whole thing? With Jeff Burr and Charlie Bannon? That didn't really happen, you know?
Yeah.
That's surreal, because I grew up watching Empire films.
Wow,
and the theater. Like, I noticed you had an Eliminators poster there.
Yeah, got it right there.
I saw Eliminators, and when my dad took me to see Eliminators, Metal Storm, all those movies I grew up with.
They're so great.
So I saw it in 3D back in the day.
Trancers.
I absolutely love. That's the best movie ever made.
Dude, you Tyson. He is now our best friend. I love. Dude, I've got the first 4 Trancers on VHS sitting over here. My dad rented Trancers for me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
To me, Tim Thomerson is phenomenal. Like, I love Tim Thomerson.
Tim's a great guy. I worked on a couple of things with Tim too. They're not features, but shorts.
Yeah.
Tim was just kind of in the mix. This is all around the same time after I moved to LA. It was a couple of different. It was weird because they were with 2 totally different groups of people. And I'll tell you something funny about Tim. The first short I worked with him on, I realized that he had trouble memorizing his lines, and he would he'd cut the script up into pieces and tape it in front of him wherever he was. So just off camera. So you couldn't see that, but he could. Mm-hmm. And I was riding around in his car with him. We're just talking about everything, talking about Albert Pune, working with Albert Pune and all this stuff. It was just, he's a very funny guy, as you can imagine, being a comedian. And when Stacey Randall was in that, if you know who she is, because she's in the Transfer sequels, she's in 4 and 5 with Tim. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we did that. And then maybe later that year or something, I got called out I was doing a boom operator job, which I'm not suited for at all, but I got brought on as a boom operator on another film. And then we're out in the desert filming this thing, and all of a sudden this car comes up and Tim Thomerson gets out. I'm like, hey, Tim, this is weird. And then he comes, he's like, hey, man. And he was playing a priest, and he gives me the Bible prop, and he's like, hey, man, can you cut my script? Can you cut my lines out and just stick them in this Bible for me? Because he knew I was the guy, I knew. I'm like, I know the deal, Tim. So it's so funny. I cut all his lines out, put them in the Bible. And then when he takes the Bible out to read whatever passage he's supposed to be doing, he's reading his dialogue off the thing. So, but he was, he's a great guy. It was, once again, that was surreal too for me, So I got once again all these things. I mean, that one sort of connects back to Jeff too, because those were the people who made the first short were friends of Jeff's, who needed someone to come out and work on that for 3 days, and I was around. So a lot of roads lead back to Jeff Burr for me.
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, I believe Rick had met him and had a really great interaction with him, and I unfortunately never got the pleasure. But yeah,
anybody who met him, anybody who's ever met him,
I've never heard somebody. Yeah, always. I've never heard anybody. I've met several people who said they've met him at different things, and every single person to a person, it's like, oh, he's the greatest guy. Yeah. Yeah. That's sad. And on a side note, so I also collect movie posters, and they have to, for me, because I try to make sure they're original theatrical. I will go video store, but I don't like reproductions by and large. If I can,
yeah, me either.
Yeah, I've got an original Black Christmas, but it's Silent Night, Evil Night right here above.
I used to have that poster.
Oh yeah, it's great. And
you bought it from me.
Was it what? Was it autographed by Art Hindle?
No.
Okay,
no.
Mine's okay. that would have been amazing. If I had your poster on top of it, I would have completely plotzed.
Mine was really beat up, really ragged, and this was a really good shape. To a new home,
Yeah, but, yeah. I got a shockingly good deal because most of those suckers go for stupid money now. It's insane.
It's ridiculous. Yeah,
I realized when he passed, I was like, you know what? I never got a poster for The Offspring, and he's one of those guys I would love to have met in a con and tried to get him to sign it.
Oh, he would have loved to meet you too. I mean, he was very undervalued by the industry, and a lot of his experiences out here were not particularly good. I was witness to some of that. That's why he took his name off of some films. That's, he was definitely not treated well or appreciated by producers or by the industry. I think fans appreciated him, although maybe a bit late too, because in the 90s, it was very common to beat up on directors like Jeff and Tony Hickox, who I was also friends with. I also worked with him on a project. That was really awful, actually, that time, because Tony and Jeff died within 4 or 5 days of each other. And I frankly couldn't believe it was almost too much to process. But people like Tony and Jeff, you know, they weren't really that valued, frankly. And, you know, they worked hard to entertain and put do cool stuff. And they love these guys. I'll tell you what they both have in common is they love horror movies.
Yep.
And you can feel it in their work, but that kind of passion is not always appreciated by producers, distributors, and so on. The movie of Jeff, I will say one more thing about Jeff. The movie, if you really want to see a real personal film by Jeff, watch a movie called Eddie Presley that he directed.
Yeah, Rick has highly recommended that. He loves that movie.
Yeah, I would too.
I haven't seen it yet.
I rewatched it last year after he passed away, and I'll watch it again. And that's a really true honest portrait of Hollywood. I think it's actually just as true now as it was in 92 or 93 when they made it. And it's a kind of bit harder to find. I'm not sure where it's at in terms of distribution now, but I've got a DVD of it. I would highly recommend that. And Jeff was really proud of that movie. So more proud of that movie than a lot of the horror films that he did, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I know Rick had recommended that one. I still haven't had a chance to track it down. Although I think when he first told me, I think eBay had some reasonably priced DVD.
It's probably better grab it now when you can.
Yeah.
Because
well, that was The Offspring. So what ended up happening is I was like, I don't have this poster, and I was like, you know, even though he's gone, I don't know how much it is, so I'm going to look. And so I found one, and dude, this is so weird to me. It means probably nothing, but to me it was a cool weird where I find one. There's only one available. And it was autographed by him, C. Courtney Joyner, and Darren Scott, the three writers. So somebody must have met them at a con, got the three of them to autograph it. And I was like, boom. I grabbed it.
Probably somebody out here had that because those guys, I know all three of those guys, and they all live here. And I wouldn't be surprised if was someone in the area, you know, I mean, somebody in LA got that.
Well, I'm proud that I own it now.
That's awesome. That's the triumvirate. I mean, those are the three that we want on that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Yeah, it was very cool. So, but yeah, and then of course you mentioned Tony Hickox too, because I love Waxwork and Sundown, and actually I like Hellraiser 3 a lot too. I'm not gonna, people say what they. It's a fun movie.
Yeah, they're all fun, and I worked with Tony on a script that. Essentially, it was a script I had written for some producers that were bringing a director on. This was supposed to be made on a bigger budget. And Tony was brought on, attached, as they say. So ended up having some meetings with Tony and then, ended up hanging out with him a bit and rewriting the script with him, which once again was just an interesting experience to be, the writer, working with the director whose work I grew up with. And you mentioned Sundown. That's in my desert book.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
that's I have a whole chapter on desert vampire films. Which includes, it's a short chapter, but significant. You got the Velvet Vampire, you've got Near Dark, you've got Sundown.
Best vampire movie ever, Near Dark. So I didn't interrupt
Near Dark is probably my favorite vampire film.
Oh, greatest. I love Martin so much.
And
Martin's great.
John Carpenter's Vampires.
Oh yeah, that's yes.
So anyway, that's part of it. So that, but Sundown's a real quirky film. In fact, that's Tony's favorite film of his.
It's a fun movie. Yeah, I love Campbell in it because he kind of plays against. I mean, he goes a little Bruce Campbell toward you, but for the most part he plays it totally
right. Van Helsing.
Yeah, the Van Helsing character. David Carradine's great. It's such a great movie. And I wonder, so would the chapter on Florida vampires be shorter, do you think?
Florida vampires.
Yeah.
Tell me some Florida vampires.
Well, I do own, thanks to Lunch Meat, I bought when they had, I think it's called Trailer Park Vampire. I believe it's set in Florida. And I had an idea for one that was called Sunshine State Vampire. But other than that, I got nothing. I have to really
it's kind of hard. Vampire, I mean, even doing the vampire chapter. Oh, there was another one. I'll tell you another really weird, obscure one. Runaway Nightmare.
I don't know.
You guys ever heard of that?
That sounds vaguely familiar.
I stumped you. I knew I'd stump you at some point.
You may have stumped me, man. What year did it come out?
Runaway Nightmare. I'll tell you how obscure. Well, first of all, who put it out? I want to say Vinegar Syndrome might have put it out at some point on DVD. But that's a movie that I picked up. I had my book. The manuscript had been delivered to McFarland, the publisher.
Okay.
And I was like, but you know how these books, books can keep going as long as you let them go. And anyway, I happened to get a copy of this Runaway Nightmare, and I was just watching it more for fun. And I'm like watching it, and it's a desert vampire movie. It definitely has a Raiden Steckler-esque quality about it, but it's got a couple other things mixed in, kind of some Euro horror kind of feel. Anyway,
okay.
Saw that movie, and I'm like, I can't not put this in the book. It has to. I want to be as completist as possible. As a fan, I'd want the book to have that. So I actually went to the publisher and I said, "You mind if I add this one more review?" And I added it. They got it in.
Nice.
But
was it 1982? Was that
yeah.
Yeah, I found it.
Early 80s release.
Yeah.
The movie is definitely made in the 70s.
Yeah, look, the pictures look very 70s.
Yeah, it's very 70s. Like and the Velvet Vampire, I don't know if you guys have seen that one, but that's a really cool, another Euro horror inflected Roger Corman production.
Yeah, I thought it was a Corman.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Corman did it, and Stephanie Rothman directed it. An early example of a female horror director.
Yeah,
and really interesting movie, shot in Mojave. Anyway, very different, kind of out there, and it's worth checking out too. That and Runaway Nightmare actually almost complement each other because they're both kind of dreamy. They're not that like rough and tumble Western sundown near dark vampires. They're more like dreamier, kind of Euro horror genre land kind of vampires. That's what those movies are like.
And before I do this, because I literally have both of your books in my Amazon cart as we're talking.
All right.
Is that the best way to get them? Because I tend to be like, hey, artist, I'd rather you get the lion's share of the money.
I'll be honest with you. The best way to get them is straight from me.
Okay,
because
well, then I will
actually make the money off of it, not a tiny percentage.
And then I also could maybe get a little John Hancock action on the.
Yeah, it could happen.
Okay. So I will empty my cart because I did not hit buy yet. I wanted to ask. I was like, I want to because I always, especially with like movies, because
I'll show you. Stay right where you are.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to do the same thing too, Joel. I'm gonna get a copy.
And he's got the Hitcher on the cover of the Terror in the Desert. So
is that not like for us? That it's like the perfect. Joel and Tyson.
That's it right there. Yeah.
How awesome is that?
There's the Hitcher.
To see.
Yeah.
That's, I gotta have a lot of.
Yeah.
There's some pictures from U-Turn there. But basically, and all the stills in this book are from my personal archive too.
Oh,
that
nice.
I've collected over the years. And then here's Neon Nightmares.
Yeah. Oh, the body double cover is great.
The body double cover. Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And I will say this. And I think Tyson, you definitely concur. We always call them like highway horror, but same principle. Terror in the Desert. Yeah, that subgenre. That for me and interloper films, like Hand That Rocks the Cradle, Psycho Stepfather and interloper film, anything like that, I freaking love. I love
the 90s. The 90s was full of movies.
Oh, like Unlawful Entry. Dude, you got Kirk Douglas, Madeline Stowe, Ray Liotta, and an interloper movie? Come on, son.
A friend of mine used to call those harassment films.
Or that. I'll take that. Yeah.
Where somebody's being harassed. Like it could be as simple as it could be as ugly as like a Spit on Your Grave or Death Weekend or House on the Edge of the Park. Or it could be something that's mainstream as Unlawful Entry, but there's that harassment going on. Where somebody just won't leave somebody alone and nobody wants to listen to the victim,
Yep.
With the Desert Book, you talked about highway horror. Okay, I literally had to break this into 3 parts. The part on the road because there's so many.
Oh yeah.
The first part is Highways to Hell, and that's more about like people getting caught up in something. Like you're
breakdown.
Caught up in breakdown. Breakdown. Breakdown would be an example. Okay, or The Hitcher. But then you've got like on the other side of the coin, you got movies where the psychopaths are behind the wheel. Like you got a movie there's a movie called The Road Killers, which is great with Christopher Lambert and there's a bunch of actors in that. Joseph Gordon-Levitt's in it when he was a kid, but there's a whole bunch of people in it. That's a very underrated, cool film. It's Craig Sheffer. That's who it is from Nightbreed and all that stuff. Craig Sheffer is a great psychopath in that movie. And Christopher Lambert is like the father with a family that gets, attacked.
I love, and I'm going to find so many great movies that I've not seen because of this book. Dude. I'm so.
I hope. So. I mean, I had to I had to narrow it down after a while because there were so many neo-noir movies that were great in the 90s, like U-Turn, Lost Highway,
Red Rock West. Yeah,
some of those films they fit in, some of them didn't. I had to kind of make judgment calls because otherwise the book would never get finished. Yeah. And then the third chapter is the thing we called I call murder machines. Which is we talked about earlier, like The Car and
Duel, obviously.
Wheels of Terror and There's a movie called Nightmares. It's like has a great segment with Lance Henriksen where he's getting attacked by a truck.
Okay.
Those type of stuff. Duel is the biggest and most obvious example.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So I was curious. Is how would you categorize Duel? Because everyone always thinks of the truck, but technically, there's a psycho driving it.
Duel, there is, and you do see glimpses of the driver.
You see his boots.
There is a human behind the wheel of that car, but for my purposes, I chose the Murder Machine just because it's the way Spielberg directs that.
Yeah.
And the way the story is written too, the Richard Matheson story.
Yes.
It's clearly the truck is kind of like it's sort of standing in for a larger entity. It's not really like, oh, there's a driver and he's this and he's that. No. That's all out the window. It's just it's all about the truck and this sort of like a malevolent entity that the truck is. In fact, this was really cool. I hosted a 35 millimeter screening of Duel. Nice. Right before the pandemic, back early 2020 at the Autry Museum, which is like a museum of the West that we have out here with all Western culture and stuff. And that was cool. Universal delivered a beautiful 35 millimeter print of Duel. That's awesome. It looked like it had never been run.
Oh, that's
but that's, and we did Vampires one year too. The Carpenter Vampires. We did Ghost Town, that Charlie Band.
Oh, yeah. I remember Ghost Town.
That was the first one we did. We did Ghost Town, and I was thinking, that's how you want to start the series? But okay. but Ghost Town's an interesting movie with a lot of weird history behind it and a lot of directorial changes, let's just say. In fact, Jeff Burr was originally
really?
Ghost Town. Yeah, he was. We did another movie called Curse of the Undead, which is the first vampire Western. That's a Universal movie from the 50s.
Oh, very cool.
So, yeah, that's another rare one, kind of like, who knew? I mean, literally at the end of the Universal horror cycle, like let's say 1955, maybe 57, was one of the last ones that they produced.
Yeah.
And it's the first on record, as far as I'm concerned, it's the first Western vampire film.
I don't know if you covered any TV movies, but there was one. Okay,
yes,
I do a show called Terror on the Tube, and we focus on movies from the 70s, 80s, and literally we've only done 2 from the 90s because there really aren't that many that we've wanted to cover.
Yeah, it kind of dried up in the 90s.
Yeah, it really did. But
the 70s was a golden era for that.
So Night Terror.
Yes,
in there. With Valerie Harper.
Harper, great movie.
See, one of the conceits of the show is that, and we have it on this channel as well, but it's like a podcast on its own. And what we do is we have basically we've numbered all these movies. My friend who lives in Sweden, he created this huge master list, and we have never, these are mostly titles we might have heard of, but we've never seen, we know nothing about. So we go totally cold, like the audience would have back in 1974.
Right. Well, that's the best way to see a movie.
It totally is.
Oh my God. It's so easy to read up on things now, but sometimes you shouldn't.
It's so much more fun that way. So Night Terror, Night Terror, as soon as I realized what it was, when I realized it was like Duel with Valerie Harper, I was like, oh, yes. Oh, yeah, it was great.
It's great with the killer with the thing. He's got the voice box and whatever. Yeah. That's a great that's a great example of how, Duel is the example of how TV films could rise to like a 4-star, brilliant, masterpiece level. But Night Terror is a very solid movie. Very solid, it's suspenseful. She's very good in it. She's great at playing a harried victim that's always getting in situations. No, I got a lot of TV movies in there because there are a lot of interesting ones. Yeah. Like there's a movie called Black Noon. That's like a another like Western horror, supernatural kind of thing. That's in my like Native American chapter. Well, there's a movie called not High Plains. Well, High Plains Drifters kind of mentioned, but High Desert Kill. You ever seen High Desert Kill?
I know that title.
That's from the early 90s, a USA Network movie with Chuck Connors, Mark Singer, the Beastmaster, and the Tony Geary, who was on General Hospital and a bunch of other stuff. It's a real interesting, weird, like an alien invasion in the desert movie.
Okay. I know the title,
like shot in a pueblo in New Mexico. It's just an interesting movie. That's on Blu-ray now, believe it or not.
Okay. I will look that up for sure. I just
Night Terror is on Blu-ray too.
Okay. Well, it is? Oh, Night Terror is on Blu-ray?
Night Terror, I think, who put that out? I want to say Code Red or something like that, Scorpion or something, because Kino Lorber has it. That's all I know. Kino has it. Like, if you go to Kino Lorber's site, they've got it. But
okay.
But there were a lot of things in the 70s, 80s. Like the killer car, there's a movie called Wheels of Terror. You ever seen Wheels of Terror?
No.
That movie's
I
on
might have Wheels of
VHS.
Terror somewhere.
Oh, you have
Look
it?
in your
He's more.
VHS archives.
He's a car guy. Like anything that's got a car on the cover. Tyson's
Wheels
probably
of
gonna.
Terror is it's crazy, and it was written by the screenwriter who wrote Halloween 4 and Wrong Turn. So it's got Alan McElroy. So it's got like definitely.
And I love both of those movies. So great. That's awesome.
Wheels of Terror. So that one that's a fun one. And those are just some of the ones. But in both of my books, I talk about TV movies because, frankly, as far as the Neon Nightmares stuff goes in LA, in the 70s, there was like an explosion of like what happened to my daughter movies. Like, my daughter went to the big city and bad stuff happened.
Like hardcore being an
oh my God, that's my daughter,
Yeah.
That's the big, biggest one, the best one. But there's a movie called Track Down, which is terrific with Jim Mitchum. That was a theatrical movie, but you had like all these other films like The 11th Victim and even this like Dawn Portrait of a Teenage Runaway and all these.
I know that title.
That's a classic. And there was even a sequel to that called Alexander, The Other Side of Dawn, which is a same type of thing with a guy getting sucked into the, the seedy underworld of LA. And so there were all these films, and that started in the kind of the late 70s and it continued in the 80s. And so, I got all those movies in there too. If they're appropriate to the theme, which these books are kind of like based around places too. I kind of like to, like the desert, I kind of like to deal with like a place. And then I kind of like to deal with, in the desert book, it goes from the silent era till 2018. So that covers like 100 years of movies.
Wow.
Neon Nightmares covers 10 years of movies, but somehow it took longer to write and was more movies to write about. So, over 200 movies that fit in there in the between 1980 and 89, starting with American Gigolo and ending with Tango and Cash,
Cool.
So anyway, I had a lot of fun doing these and, love talking about them.
Well, we love hearing about it. And I will say, proving that I'm a perpetual dope, I love that I asked you, are there TV movies? And we just got done talking about Duel.
Well, the thing about Duel, you know what? You can be excused for that because Duel was released theatrically later on in a long.
Later though, but initially it was like a movie of the week.
It was a 74-minute TV movie. Yeah, exactly.
Of course. Yeah. And I knew that, but I just completely whenever I think of Duel, like I know it is, but I never think of it as, and I feel like that way. I know there's a lot of Matheson stuff that was on TV, obviously with Dan Curtis, and Kolchak, all that stuff. Richard Matheson is my favorite author.
Okay. I got to say this then. I was just thinking this before you said Richard Matheson. Here's another TV movie from the 70s. You have to see that Richard Matheson also wrote Dying Room Only.
Dying Room Only. Okay.
Probably on
Peter put it on the list.
Yeah, Peter probably put it on the list.
Or just get this. But I mean, they're all in here. But Cloris Leachman's in it, Dabney Coleman. And anyway, it's like literally one of these things where a couple stops in a diner and they're in the middle of nowhere and one of them gets abducted. We don't know how or where or who. And the other one's trying to figure out what happened to their, where did my wife go? And it's like Breakdown. If you think of the Kurt Russell movie Breakdown, which is, I think, a tremendous movie, not as big as that, but it's that same concept of like, you're isolated and no one will help you. Right. And how are you going to figure this out by yourself? Because the cops don't going to help. Nobody's going to help.
That so much. I love
Dying Room Only.
I will bet $1 million. Peter, my co-host at TruthTube, is yelling right now and all is going, don't tell him that one. I have it on our list. He's supposed to be surprised. Sorry, Peter.
Add it to the list.
It's definitely
I'm sure there's plenty I haven't seen, but like when I sit down to write these books, I don't already know about all of these movies. I know about a bunch of them, maybe more than half of them. But I always, in the course of doing the research, I always end up finding a bunch of films. And that's actually the fun of it for me because I like to find out about stuff too. I mean, it's kind of boring if you're just like, well, I already seen this, seen that. I guess it's fun about writing about a movie you really love, like The Hitcher, which I'm one of my favorite movies of all time.
One of the greatest movies ever made.
It is. It's like a perfect movie.
It is. I love it so much.
I did a movie. I co-produced a movie with C. Thomas Howell. And the only thing I really wanted to do there was like a 3-week shoot or something outside of LA. The only thing I wanted to do is when I came back, first I wanted to see how he was as a person, which is a very cool guy, very funny and very professional. And after I realized he was a really cool dude, went back home on the weekend, got my Hitcher poster, brought it back up. And then, like we're in the woods. We're in like the woods of a Boy Scout camp, which would have been a great place to shoot a slasher film, but that's not what we're making. But anyway, I'm like, go, knock on his door. Hey, Tommy, would you mind doing something for me? And so I opened up the poster and put it on a log, like literally like on a stump. There was nowhere else to put it. There was no table. There was no anything. I put it on the stump and he wrote, "Keep your eyes on the road." So Tommy Howe. So
that's awesome, man.
That's my Hitcher. That's my Tommy Howe Hitcher moment.
That's awesome. That movie is fantastic.
About that movie was it was just a lot of sitting in the car. He said, I just always need to go. I was always like, can I just go to the bathroom? Because he was always stuck, for these long scenes of just being sitting in the car with Rutger Hauer. But
I imagine
he
was
appreciates
intense.
his fans. He appreciates his fans, and he knows that that's a film that one of the films that people like to talk to him about. So.
Well, I want to say, because I know you got a heart out here. We're right up against 7, and I want to. We're 4 o'clock your time. I want to say
we can get a little bit more in, to talk about Dreams of the Dead or things like that.
I do want to, but I don't want to take up too much of your time if you got to bail. So are you good?
Let it go a little bit.
Okay. All right. Cool. I just want to make sure. All right. So So before we let you go, though, I want to make sure that we do talk about a VHS that I'm waiting for, which is the Dreams of the Dead. Now, I put down the date on that is 1994 because I believe that's when you made it.
Yes.
But I guess the release date it never got an official release, right?
Never got an official release. I mean, you have to think about the time frame. 1994, making your own micro-budget horror movie, there weren't very many out there. And it's not because people weren't making them necessarily. It was just that there was no distribution for them. And the ones that were distributed got very, very minimal distribution. Maybe, and I'm talking about mom and pop shops. Well, they were, like I remember I found Killing Spree in a pop store that I was working in at the time, but I wouldn't have found it otherwise. But they were hard to find. And I think there were very few people taking them on, and a lot of filmmakers were self-releasing movies. Now, I was still in my teens when I made the Dreams of the Dead. So I was just in starting film school. So I was really thinking these projects more as creative projects, things to do with my friends, make a movie and take it seriously. But we weren't thinking, we can make a buck off this, or we're going to get distribution for this, or we're going to, we just didn't think that way. And there also weren't festivals back then to take these type of movies at all. So it was a different landscape. So no, there was no release for it at all back then. I just literally finished it, showed it to friends and family, and maybe some filmmakers here and there along the road, but I put it in the closet. So. Yeah.
And so you are releasing it though now, and I know it's going to be you're doing the VHS release because I know I will have one coming my way at some point, but also I'm assuming will it also be made available through other channels?
Basically last year I spent some time off and on restoring the movie. And what that really included, first and foremost, was doing a whole new music score for it because the music that was in it was unlicensed music. So we had to take that out, take out the John Carpenter music or whatever. Well, like the Pact, the original version of the Pact had John Carpenter music in it. That was the version I used to show people. That was my directing sample. Actually, that got me my first professional movie in LA. But when the Pact was released commercially and first in 2013, I think it was 2012 or 2013, that was the main thing we had to do is put new music in. So with Dreams of the Dead, we've got a whole new music score. Very talented guy named David Zuzello who did some music, some new cues for the film, and some music he already had that we put in that fit really well. We also did new titles, opening and closing titles. I did a couple of tweaks to it. I did not re-edit the movie. I did not want this movie I'm not trying to pretend like this movie was made in 2024. It's obviously made in 1994, and I think that's part of the charm of it.
It is.
But I just wanted it to, but I still want to give it the best presentation I can give to modern viewers. So we restored it, and I approached a distributor that I've had other movies released by, like High Fear, Wild Eye Entertainment. And they have a label called Visual Vengeance.
I love Visual Vengeance.
Okay.
I've got several titles from them. Yeah.
You got Scream Queen?
You know what's funny? I think that's one of the few I have yet to pick up. and I know that's your movie.
Great. Thanks a lot,
I know.
man.
No, I know. I realized it. As you said it. No, I literally probably within the last year or so, maybe 2 years, I started picking up time, like I tell my wife and my kids, hey, for Christmas, give me whatever. So I've got like Suburban Sasquatch and several of the other ones. Yeah. But no, Scream Queen, I have a list. So it is on my list. Yeah. I will get it. Now that I realize that was your movie, of course I'm going to get movie. It. Yeah.
That was not to digress, but that was my first professional movie in LA. Oh, that was the first movie I directed after The Pact. So basically, did The Pact in 95. A few years went by. I moved to LA, worked on some other films, did, graduated film school, worked on some movies. And I was showing The Pact to whoever I could show it to. And I showed it to this one producer who basically said, what have you got? I'll back you on a really small film. And so that really small film ended up being Scream Queen with Linnea Quigley. Mm-hmm. That was my first movie. However, that movie, we shot it in 1998, was not commercially released really until 2023. No. Now, please understand, most of my movies had been released a year or so after I made them. Yeah. But Scream Queen, that was the particular journey for that movie.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got off on that. Oh, we're talking about Visual Vengeance.
Visual Vengeance, yes.
Right. So Visual Vengeance, they did put out Scream Queen last year. And I'm in business with them for 10 years with different films, the High 8 movies, Plaguers, different movies. And so I basically approached them about it and about Dreams of the Dead. And I said, I've got this movie, it's restored, it's ready to go. And they were interested in releasing that on Blu-ray. So I made a deal with them to release it on Blu-ray and streaming. But I'm doing the VHS myself.
Cool.
Because we've done other VHSs ourselves in-house. I have like a partner that I work with on these who's been doing this stuff for a while, and he does these limited runs. So basically, this is a way for in a way, it's like a convention tape or something kind of like that, where you're like, hey, if you want to be ahead of
one of the cool kids, want to be one of the cool kids
on the block and see Dreams of the Dead first.
Yep.
Well, you need to have a VCR,
which I have a couple.
Get on this because it's a 50-unit run.
Okay.
And then the Blu-ray will be, I would say, next year. In fact, it's kind of interesting. I've been literally putting the extras together for it these last few weeks. And I've even getting interviews with friends that are from 30 years ago, friends that worked on this movie 30 years ago, talking about their experience as high schoolers or recent high school grads making a movie. So that's kind of interesting to go back to that, to hear what they have to say, Yeah. So that's the deal with the movie. And also the other thing that's cool about Dreams of the Dead is it's playing in festivals. It's even going to play at a drive-in next month.
Oh, I love drive-in so much.
Yeah, it's going to.
We have one. We have one here where I live. It's was built in 1948. Has done two screens, still operational. Runs every week, every night actually. Double feature on both sides. And I love drive-ins. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. No, me too. The first movies I saw as a kid were driving at the drive-in. My parents took me to see Star Wars and some Disney, for the Rescuers or something like that. And so it's extremely cool to have a film, especially a film that you made 30 years ago. But that's going to be the premiere. Actually, its world premiere is going to be next month, and the Skyline Drive-In in Shelbyville. In Indiana.
Nice! That's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I wish I could be there.
That one. That'd be awesome.
So that's coming up, and there's another screening. There's a festival called Gross Fest. That's a big indie horror thing in Pennsylvania. They're screening it there in August. And then there's some more things that are coming up in September, October. So the movie's going to have a nice little festival run, which is great. And I highly doubt that would have happened back in 1994. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if I tried, I don't know where I would have gone with it, really, to do these type of things.
I don't want to, take up too much more of your time, but I do want to ask, because I think it's a fascinating idea that, and I'm sure nostalgia plays a heavy part of this, but I've noticed people who didn't grow up even with it seem to have this where, and maybe it's because everything is so perfect, everyone tries to filter everything seems so clean, that's what all this AI stuff, it's
AI,
it's too perfect, it's too clean, it's too slick.
It is a rebellion. It's a rebellion against that.
I think there is, and I wonder, I was thinking, it feels like there's an actual honest to God market in a way that there maybe wasn't even when this stuff was sort of even in the late 80s at its prime.
I've been having that conversation with a lot of different people lately. I just was talking to Tim Gross from Gross Fest about that yesterday. He gave me wrote a real nice review for the movie. He's the first person to review it. We were having that exact conversation about how SOV stuff is better received now than it would have been in 1994, or maybe even 2004, for that matter.
Yes.
Or even 2014.
Yes.
I mean, how long has this resurgence been going on now for? Maybe 5-10 years or so?
Yeah.
Because when we did High 8, I did High 8 in 2013. We did High 8 because the Pact had just come out the first time. When it was first released, it was on a VHS and DVD combo that Sub Rosa put out, SRS Cinema. They put that out as a limited run, 50 units. That sold out within 8 hours. Wow. And that was an interest, and they were all selling out. And he was actually ahead of the game with that. There wasn't a whole lot of retro VHS going on at that time. People were starting to get their feet wet in there, but not so much. But that was really interesting. I'm like, okay, there's a real, but even then, I don't think it was still not as big as it is now. Now it's and I think the AI is a huge thing. Everyone's tired of the burnished, airbrushed, smooth, fake crap that you can't tell where it came from or who made it or what the hell is it. But these movies, you know exactly who did it. A kid with a camcorder.
Yes, and even if I feel like too, there's something to be said for even making something now, but intentionally shooting, like getting old cameras, even like
you can do that. I mean, my friend Bobby did that with his movie called Grandma. He actually,
I have Grandma on VHS.
I was an executive producer on that too.
Oh, were you? Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, once again, I'm more like a cheerleader.
Oh yeah, that's great though, man. I love that.
That and Mom and Pop. But I liked what he was doing with Grandma. And he approached me about Grandma and said, "This is what we're doing." And this is, he's almost asking for advice. Actually, what it was one of the things I did on that was I gave him I wouldn't call it a tutorial, but I filled out some gave him some info about how we made those movies back then. That's literally one of the things I did on Grandma, because he wanted it to look and feel like that. Yeah. And I think he accomplished that to a large degree. So, but it's hard to mimic a certain time frame technically and culturally. I think it's hard to capture that. People have done it, obviously, but it's hard to do. Yeah, it's not something I would want to do necessarily, but I wouldn't dissuade anyone from doing it. Yeah. I just think that it is cool though to see people appreciating what this outsider art or primitive art or whatever.
That's what it is. It's outsider art. That you hit the nail on the head. That's what it is.
It always was. I mean, we were outsiders when it was a big fucking deal. Yeah. To get a movie into Blockbuster back in the day, let me tell you, I did a movie called Death Factory that did very well. It was its distributor's best-selling title. That was my first movie in Blockbuster, and I'd probably made at least 10 movies by that point. But it was in LA. I'm not talking about the older stuff. I'm talking about stuff I made in LA. Took a bunch of tries at bat before I hit that home run into Blockbuster. And of course, that was more because of the distributor too, because they pushed it more. Yeah. But that was a big deal. Anytime you got a movie into Hollywood Video or Blockbuster, and then those times are a little bit easier than they were, say, than the 80s or 90s. The late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, there was a little bit more wiggle room there, but it was still difficult. So it's always been outsider art. These movies they've always been put down by Fangoria. They've been put down by a lot of people. I had so many bad reviews in Fangoria, it's not even funny. And some of those movies now have 10 sequels to them. Yeah. Like Camp Blood. Yeah. So, I'm just saying, we were not treated particularly well.
It's not true though. Oftentimes when you're doing something outside of expectation and what the mainstream thinks is okay, in that time, you feel totally alone and isolated and nobody gets it and no one's understand. And then it's almost like if you just wait long enough, sooner or later,
if you're lucky and live long enough, I didn't think I'd be talking about Jeff Burr having been passed away at age 60.
Fair enough.
But I will say this, that those of us, I mean, especially when I started directing movies in LA, there was a community, which I don't think really exists so much anymore, but there was a filmmaking community that had an interesting crossbreeding between, let's call it mid-range budget movies, let's say Lionsgate movies, or straight-to-video movies, or Full Moon movies, or whatever, and people who are making real micro budget stuff, but there was a lot of intermixing of that. And people like Jeff Burr were kind of the center of that because they encouraged everybody. They weren't snobs.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel alone because I knew other filmmakers, and we were helping each other out. Sometimes I would like literally borrow an actor from a buddy of mine's movie, and his movie was $1 million movie and mine was a $20,000 movie. But you know what? It didn't matter. Mm-hmm. And that actor wanted to act too. Mm-hmm. I talked about effects guys before, same thing. So there was that interchange in the community that existed. You didn't feel so alone. You only felt alone once you got your movie reviewed. Then you're like, okay, I'm definitely down. I'm definitely down here, and Eli Roth is up here or whatever. Yeah. But it's always been kind of like that. So it's really been cool to see like the resurgence. It really is a resurgence now, I think, at this point, of people just saying, hey, this stuff has value. Like talking about these SOB movies, the earlier ones, this stuff has value. It's unique. It's regional. Yeah. It expresses something personal. Yep. Not all of them do. Sometimes people are just trying to chase a trend or chase a buck. I'm not saying everybody was, being an artist or whatever. Yeah. But I think that a lot of them, though, do show some personality beyond, let's say, your standard studio sequel or direct-to-video franchise or whatever. I think they kind of, and
they have heart.
They have heart, and the best of them do. The best
ones have. You can tell these are people.
There were certain movies back then that were definitely that were contemporary filmmakers making movies that were inspiring to me. But I've always been inspired by a lot of different things. I'm inspired by European movies. I'm inspired by horror and film noir, other things. I'm not just like only watching horror and only want to do that. In fact, that's why The Pact has the tone that it has. And when you see Dreams of the Dead, you'll see there's other things going on in these movies other than just straight horror. Yeah. In fact, back then, I never would have wanted to make a movie like Camp Blood. I cut to a few years later and I made one. But but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Sykes, dude, this has been an honor. Seriously, man. I love hearing stories like this, and you're a very inspiring guy who I get that for what it's worth. I get that Jeff Burr spirit in you of you just are very just supportive and just have a great attitude. And actually, that was one of the things I immediately liked about you in the Film Courage. You made the comment about even appreciating when you occasionally see a boom mic drop in the frame because but I was like, I get that. Like you either get that or you don't get that, right?
I think they thought I was crazy when I said
that.
No,
I totally understood what you meant. I totally got that.
I just think when I see that, I think to myself, people were working here. Yes. People were making something, and they didn't always have the time or the resources to do another take, or somebody didn't notice it or whatever. But you know what? Does that really decrease your appreciation? Does that really make you not like the film? I mean, some of my favorite films have technical gaffes in them. And I got news for you. There's a lot of big, highly regarded
continuity errors and everything else.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't really, and I was just watching Mean Streets the other day, which is a terrific film, but there's a lot of out of focus shots in that. Yep. And does that mean Scorsese's a moron or the DP's a moron? No. They don't even care because the energy level and the reality of that film is such that you're involved and pulled into that world, period. I mean, you're not, if you're looking at that and that's what you judge film by, then you don't love movies then. No, like you don't really understand film and you don't love movies if that's what you're focusing on. That's
that's why I love looking at like his short films from NYU.
The Big Shave and all that.
The Big Shave, I have the collection and the Criterion collection put out a while back. Yeah. And then Who's That Knocking at My Door? I remember renting that in high school. And I was like the only dork that even wanted. I was like, they had it. I had a Specs Music and Movies at our mall, and they had Who's That Knocking at My Door on VHS. I was like, that's Scorsese's NYU movie. He made it into a feature with Keitel. Holy crap! Oh my God, dude. I love that.
I didn't know that was on VHS. Like it was. I saw that was on DVD. I didn't know it was on tape.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, there probably was a tape or MGM tape or something.
I'm so shocked that our Specs carried it, but it was there. There you go.
You never know, man. One of the first tapes I ever found in a mall in Georgia. This is a Camelot Music, which was a chain back then.
I remember Camelot.
Okay. My Camelot Music in Marietta, Georgia had a little section, like a display on the floor that had a bunch of tapes in it, and they're usually previously viewed, which is kind of a bit odd if you think about it. But anyway, they had them. Well, one of the tapes I got from them, one of the first tapes I ever got was Headless Eyes.
Headless Eyes.
You guys ever heard of Headless Eyes?
I've heard of it, but I'm trying to visualize.
It was a
the
Wizard
cover.
Video big box.
Oh, nice.
With like, a eyeball trailing away from the victim. But anyway, you never know what you'd find in the mall.
Yeah.
Weird stuff sometimes.
So yes, but again, I want to thank you very much for doing this, for taking time out.
Sure, yeah, you're welcome.
And I would love to have you on again. Maybe we can review some movies from one of your books, like some of the classics.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be really fun. I'm always up for talking about these films. Obviously, that's why I wrote the books in the first place.
We love finding kindred spirits and being able to just have fun. So we'd love to have you back. And in the meantime, tell everybody where they could find, and we'll put it in the show notes as well, but where they could find you and get your work and your books and your
easiest. I'm on Facebook. Nightfall Pictures is my company, and you can always find me there, and you can ask about anything that we've released, whether it's a book or a movie or whatever. I'm on there too, Brad Sykes. BRADSYKES, and I'm also on Instagram at Nightfall Pics. It's all one word, like Pics, PIX. Those are the main. We have an official website too, Nightfall Pictures. So I'm out there. I'm pretty easy to find and get back to people.
And so if they want to get if they want to get copies of your books or get your movies,
I'm the book Neon Nightmares has its own Facebook page that I put updates. In fact, it's kind of cool. A friend of mine's been he was working on a movie, and basically he's been finding actors who are like Brink Stevens, for example.
I love Brink Stevens. He's so great.
So he's basically finding these actors and they're helping to promote my book, essentially.
Oh,
so it's
that's
kind of
so
like
cool,
actors
man.
who are in the films that are in the book.
That's so cool.
For these 80s thrillers in LA. So it's really cool. Like we just had Cassandra Gava did a thing with a book, and she was in The Black Room. You probably know her from Conan. She's like the sexy witch in Conan the Barbarian. Really cool, striking actress. She's in this movie called The Black Room, which is incredible. That I review in there. So the books, they're on Amazon, but obviously if you want to let the author actually get a real decent.
Yes, that's my point. Yes, I agree. Do that.
Believe me, I won't get into that, but believe me, it would be. Yeah. I have copies here.
All right, I would much rather get it directly from you, and I advise everyone to do the same. And get however many you have VHS copies left of your films. I'm sure it's a limited amount, but they should probably reach out to you.
Well, High Fear has. I think we just have about 10 copies of that left.
Oh, wow.
That was released last year. And, anyway, a lot of them sold out pretty quick. And then there's been a few left, but there's 10. And then Dreams of the Dead are about halfway. So there's about 20 of those left. So, if you want to get on the pre-order, probably good to do it sooner rather than later. And those movies, by the way, Dreams of the Dead are going to ship out probably around September, October.
All right, cool.
But people who pre-order are going to get it ahead of when we do the general release.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. And one last thing, I believe that when you're actually reading Neon Nightmares, it is a prerequisite to have saxophone music playing.
Exactly.
Well, I would say have some synth music playing.
Okay, synth with saxophone, maybe
maybe turn on if you have a fog machine, like a dry fogger.
Yeah.
Turn that on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And make sure the lights are shooting through the fog. You get the rays of light. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you again, sir.
Sure.
Really an honor. And as we like to say, whenever we finish up here at Mom and Pop Video Shops, at Mom and Pop's, our love of.
Well, I think obviously the High 8 trilogy, but if we're going to go with something a little more random,
you can tell we're totally prepared professionals here, Brad.
Altered States.
Never stops.
For you
Ken
Dick
Russell.
Smith effects folks
Excellent.
out there.
Yeah,
Ken Russell.
never.
Can't go wrong with Ken Russell.
That's right. Never stops.
I have that DVD.